Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of Health meeting for September's meeting. It's Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. It is 4:32 p.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the board. We have our Vice Chair, Maria Williams, participating by Zoom. Here on the dais, we have board members Lynn Nelson, Dr. Beth Harvey, Carolina Mejia, Gary Edwards, and Robin Vasquez. We're going to call the meeting to order and start with consideration of the agenda and potential approval of that.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda for September 12th.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve today's proposed agenda. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next is proclamations and presentations. This meeting, we will have a proclamation related to Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I know we have several guests here who are going to give us some information before we launch into the proclamation itself. So I'm going to look to
Gretchen Teller.
Gretchen Toller, Division
Hi.
Director on Zoom. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Board of Health members. My name is Gretchen Toller. I'm the Division Director for Community Wellness at Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. Thank you so much for recognizing Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Sadly, too many of us have lost somebody that we care about to suicide. I have a little bit of data to share, and that starts with some data that's from 2017 to 2021. And that Thurston County had a higher number of hospitalizations for suicide than the state average. So we had 59 per 100,000 residents compared to 50. And then also data from our 2021 Healthy Youth Survey. And that is that 21% of our 8th graders and 22% of our 10th graders seriously considered attempting suicide. And as concerning as that it is, we know that there's been a lot that's changed in our community in the last 2 years after the pandemic. Unfortunately, we don't have newer data than that, but we do have a lot of anecdotal information, people sharing that there are many students or youth, as young as elementary age that are struggling with suicide ideations. And loneliness and mental health in general. One of the strengths of our community, though, is our partnerships that we have in trying to prevent the incidence of suicide. With this, I would like to pass it over to Shelley Willis to share more about what her organization at Family Education Support Services is doing around suicide prevention.
Commissioners, hello. Mine's very short. I simply want to thank Public Health for seeing the need in our community to address suicide prevention when there were 2 9-year-olds who committed suicide within our county within a very short timeline of each other. It was clear that we needed to take action. The Public Health Department convened a community task force bringing multidisciplinary participants together to address strategies that would help reduce suicide prevention. One of those was the implementation of free training to those who served our community. And since that time, we have held 81 trainings on this evidence-based strategy known as QPR, serving over 1,250 individuals in our county. So thank you for your foresight. We continue to move forward and address this situation and watch the numbers decline. Yes.
What does QPR stand for?
I'm sorry?
What does QPR stand for?
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure I have it. Question, persuade, refer.
Thank you.
And we are doing this in partnership with many other folks in our community. I'm sure they'll have much to share. Thank you.
Who's up next, Gretchen?
And then we should have, I couldn't see it. We should have Dr. Hernadon from ESD 113. Hopefully I pronounced his name right.
Good afternoon. Is that on?
It's on, yep.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Flip Herndon, the superintendent of the Capital Region ESD, or Educational Service District 113. I'd like to thank the Thurston County Board of Health in support of suicide prevention, and so I have a statement here that we put together. Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month is more than just a month on a calendar. It's a pressing call to acknowledge the depth of the pain and impact that suicide leaves in its wake, not just on individuals, but on families and the entire community. The stark numbers and statistics don't lie. Our community has been spared from the heartbreak. Our community has not been spared from the heartbreak of suicide. The Healthy Youth Survey underscores this alarming trend, accentuating the pressing need for collective awareness and immediate action. But remember, behind every number is a name, a face, and a story. It's a family grieving, a community in shock, and someone who felt there was no other way out. It becomes our moral imperative to extend our hands in support, our hearts in empathy, and our resources to aid. The role of the Capital Region ESD 113 cannot be understated. Our ESD's True North Behavioral Health Services stand as a beacon for many. These services are multifaceted. We identify and support our at-risk youth through early intervention and prevention before they reach a breaking point. Our services enhance academic performance, helping students to overcome their challenges and realize their full potential. We are committed to an enhanced school climate, ensuring a safe, welcoming space for all. We equip our teachers and staff with the expertise needed, paving the way for a holistic educational experience. Through community collaboration, we weave a tight-knit safety net for our adolescents. We fervently work toward reducing the stigma around mental health, advocating for open conversations. And our interventions promise long-term benefits, ensuring today's issues don't become tomorrow's crises. Capital Region ESD 113 strives to amplify mental health awareness, tear down barriers to essential services, and stand by our families and schools in every hour of need. Our newly created Safe Harbor website epitomizes this spirit. The online platform serves as a lighthouse guiding our districts, families, and youth as they seek resources for mental health, substance abuse, safety, and overall well-being. As we delve deeper into this Suicide Awareness Month, our theme, Creating Hope Through Action, resonates loudly. It's a call for unity, for compassion, for understanding. Together, let's pledge to counter the stigmas, champion early interventions, and cultivate a compassionate culture. Our endgame, a world where hope shines brighter than despair, and our communities stand resilient against the tragedy of suicide. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if there's anybody else in the room that wants to speak. That was all that I'm aware of. We also have partners from the ASO on Zoom here, and I believe Catholic Community Services.
Awesome. Anyone else? Floor is open. Okay, thank you for being here. Any questions or comments from board members?
No, sir.
Okay, I guess I'll start and we'll with our proclamation. Thurston County Proclamation, Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, September 10th through 16th, 2023 is National Suicide Prevention Week, and suicide prevention is a priority in our community.
And whereas in 2021, suicide was the 11th leading cause of death for Thurston County community members.
Whereas in 2021, 21% of Thurston County's 8th graders and 22% of Thurston County's 10th graders seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And
Whereas thinking about suicide occurs regardless of age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income level, religion, profession, or background. And
whereas talking about suicide does not increase the risk for suicide, and everyone can have a conversation with someone they are worried about or concerned about.
And whereas there is no single cause for suicide, but there are warning signs that we can learn more about. And
whereas demonstrating care and compassion about suicide is something every one of us can do.
And whereas local groups like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, and many other working to increase awareness of what can be done to prevent suicide and provide resources in our communities.
Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Health hereby proclaims September Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Thurston County and encourages all community members to envision a world dedicated to saving lives and bringing hope to those affected by suicide through prevention, education, advocacy, and resources. Adopted this 12th day of September, 2023, the Thurston County Board of Health.
Thank you so much, Board of Health members.
If the folks who are here to support this could come up and do a photo with us, we'd really appreciate that. And we can elevate it through our public information platforms. Bring the, we've got one of the.
Oh, okay. I gotta wear my hat so I can tell us apart.
You just can't let that go.
Pretend like you like each other.
Hey, Doc, get in here, I'll surround you.
Okay, and one for me, don't go too far. Nice try.
Thanksgiving, oh my gosh.
All right, 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you, everyone.
Back to the health department.
What are we
Not
doing with
tonight,
these two?
but I-
I had one for Shelley. I don't know how many different groups we wanted.
How you doing, Kelly? Thank you for coming.
one to Heidi,
Community
maybe?
services, Heidi. In the back, in the box sweater.
Okay. Next up is public comment, and before I launch into the guidelines, my sign-up list is all folks who did not want to give comment. They just signed up to support the resolution. Is there anyone in the boardroom who wants to give public comment? And let me check online. Anyone who's on Zoom would like to give public comment? Okay, so I think we don't need to go any further with that. We will move on to item 4. So we have 2 major items of discussion today. The first one is 4A, fiscal subcommittee update. Our Assistant County Manager, Robin Campbell, is going to kind of start things off because she's worked with the fiscal subcommittee. We have a couple of goals. One is to kind of hear where things have gone and where they're going, and then also to just tee up the decisions and issues that will come before the full board we think will be a major topic for our October meeting. So just to kind of flesh out where we've been, where we're going, and what the board needs to sort of have at the top of its mind for the October meeting, as we'll be making decisions about some recommendations.
Right, thank you, Commissioner. I'm gonna kick this off with just a little bit of background of where we began with the fiscal subcommittee. I'm gonna invite David to chime in, and then each of the subcommittee members are going to report out. So we started meeting at the end of June, and then we took a brief hiatus in the month of July and really got back into things in August. So by the time the fiscal subcommittee started really getting into things, it was pretty late in the budget cycle for the county. So here are some of the things that we talked about. At a very high level, these are some of the responsibilities overall of the Board of Health. The Board of Health is going to set the vision for a healthy community and identify the gaps between the what that vision is and what the current state is. Then the Board of Health will be setting goals, objectives, and priorities, basically SMART goals, about how to close that gap. Being aware at all times of what the requirements are and the prohibitions in terms of laws, where the funding's coming from, Thurston County Code. And then part of the role of the Board of Health is to assess what the options are for closing those gaps as you talk about what the priorities are. It's important for the Board of Health to know the total cost of service and be familiar with how public health is financed in Thurston County and to measure success toward achieving the goals. So overall, just part of the many duties of the Board of Health. What is not the role of the Board of Health is to pass a budget. And what we talked about in the subcommittee is that passing a budget is the role of the county commissioners. The Board of Health, however, is going to advise county commissioners, and it's a little odd, if you will, or challenging maybe, that our Board of County Commissioners are part of the Board of Health. So some of you are essentially making a recommendation to yourselves. But as the Board of Health, we think it's important for you to take off your county commissioners hats and put on your Board of Health member hats and think about how you might prioritize money. Well, I think that's your everyday hat, Commissioner Edwards, but it's a different perspective when you sit on the Board of Health perhaps than when you sit as a county commissioner, especially in terms of how you assess what to fund in the county budget. And this is a quote from the Guide to Financial Literacy for Elected Officials from Governing. It's a national organization. And what this quote says is, your job is to set priorities and make sure that your jurisdiction's money stays connected to what those priorities are. So when it comes to budget, what we talked about in the subcommittee is that it's important to, again, assess strategies and priorities and alternatives to strategies that are presented by staff. And again, it's all about how do we close the gap? What do we fund to close the gap between the vision and where we're at today? The role of the Board of Health when it comes to budget is to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, just like we've been talking, perhaps not on the finite line items. We would suggest to you that perhaps the Board of Health does not go line by line like we do with the county commissioners, but rather on overarching strategies and direction and how to align the money with those strategies. It's important that we monitor the public health budget at a very high level. And one of the duties of the Board of Health, of course, is to set fees. But according to state law, only the members of the Board of Health who are elected can vote on any matters pertaining to money. Yes.
So many of our local boards, like the Board of Health, are designed to have an odd number of voting members so we can make decisions if there's a close vote. But I'm assuming I'm an elected person,
Yes.
but I'm an appointee to the board. So
True.
for this particular piece of the Board of Health's powers, am I a voting member or am I not?
I would turn to Jane Futterman, our attorney,
Knew we would
for,
need her today. I asked her
yeah,
if she wasn't.
I think she's on the screen. But that is a good question. I think what the state law says is elected officials may vote on matters pertaining to money. Now, whether that's only our Board of County Commissioners or if that includes our members from the city, that's a great question.
Board Member Edwards.
Maybe just to follow up on that, because we talked about it this morning, was what about tribal members that are elected in their jurisdiction too, you know? So
Right.
there's other considerations as
Right.
well.
So we have a few things to explore. When it comes to a time when you're going to vote on a fee, then we'll make sure we have the answers to that question. And then, of course, it's important as we measure success to assess what barriers exist to success. Because part of the role of leaders is to break down barriers to ensure that staff can be successful in implementing any type of plan.
Robin, are you controlling the Zoom?
I am.
Could you make the little box like the strip? Because if Vice Chair Williams had wanted to, I
I'm
need to
not
see.
controlling that. That's Jamie.
That'll be perfect. Then I can see her hand if it's raised.
All right.
Otherwise, I would have no way.
Okay, so short term, I already mentioned that we really didn't get underway until early August. And given that the Board of County Commissioners has to make decisions regarding the budget by the end of October, there was not a lot of time for the subcommittee to get really familiar with the public health budget overall or the budget requests. So short term, we focused on where does the money come from and where does it go? We did an overview of the budget proposals coming out of public health, a very high level overview, and those will definitely be shared next month. Then there was a very brief review of the fee study, and we haven't gotten to the part yet where we're discussing performance goals. And then long-term, starting in January, when the subcommittee has a lot more time, then we'll really do a deeper dive into the mechanics of the funding for public health and where the money comes from and how that fits in context with the rest of the county. There will be recommendations on setting policy for public health. There will be requests for proposals, budget proposals from public health to perhaps work on certain priority areas. Monitoring of the public health budget on an ongoing basis, and then also performance reviews. So that's the long-term goal. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and ask David if he'd like to chime in.
I was doing a little legal research here on the side. And my reading of the RCW is that it does include city elected officials when it comes to the vote for fees. So it does not contemplate tribal representatives in the law, but it does talk about city officials. But we can follow up on that particular point, Commissioner Edwards. It's a good question. I don't have a whole lot to add. Robin did a great job of the overview. I really appreciated, first of all, the commitment of the subcommittee to meet with us at 7:30 in the morning on Wednesdays. Really grateful for your time on that one. And we got really good questions every meeting. Like Robin said, because of the timing of this one, we weren't able to get, as fully into as we will in future years. But I appreciated a chance to explain kind of where we are and where we want to head. And I'm hoping that in October, that the subcommittee will be able to provide, their sense of the proposals that we're providing, and whether we're heading in the right direction or if they have adjustments they think we should make. But I just want to, again, commend the work of the committee and really appreciate the time they spent with us for the last 3 months or so.
So at this point, I would invite the subcommittee members to each say a little bit about the work that we've been doing the last few months.
Any questions before we launch into that? I had a question.
I just
Go
maybe a
ahead,
quick
Councilmember
question.
Edwards.
Does foundational public health fit in a different category or something in that regard? Because that's where a lot of the money comes from or comes
Yeah.
through. Is it, or is it just kind of all into one game?
It's all part of the big picture of funding public health. Foundational public health is just one piece of the funding that the county receives for public health.
So what you'll see in the budget proposals, when you look at our budget over the next couple of weeks, you'll see requests that are funded from FPHS, if that makes sense. So it's built into the bigger budget. It's not a separate budget for us.
I would also say that unlike the last few rounds of budget that we've gone through with foundational public health funding, what we're seeing this year from the state is the new money is extremely narrowly targeted. It's not these big buckets like we had before, that you had a lot of options on what you could do with it. The state is starting to become quite directive on how the money, new money gets spent. So that's part of what you'll see next month.
I had a question on the slide where you were talking about long-term and what, and when you said, a bullet point there said, set public health policy. My question is just kind of, what is that? What would that look like? What's an example of that, that I can, to give me a flavor of what that is?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of an open-ended question. I think the vision that both Robin and I both have had for the subcommittee and the Board of Health generally, I think, is that I don't want the department to operate in isolation. Like, I'll have a view of where we should head, right, as a department. But you all represent communities, represent providers, represent tribes. And I think you've got an important role to play as I'm contemplating, what direction we head in. These are really, really significant voices in the process. So if we're contemplating, I'm trying to think of an example, if we're contemplating a shift towards, I don't know, operating more with more community health workers and doing more outreach and having more direct services in the community that way, that's a policy choice with some budget implications that I would want the board to have input on. Or it might be an idea the board comes to us and says, you know what, we really want to see, I think we've talked about school-based health clinics, for example. That's something that came from outside of my department that we want to contemplate. Is this the direction we want to head in? Does that make sense? Like, it's kind of a mutual relationship where we're providing input and ideas on where we could head next. And the idea, I think, is that we get the board comfortable enough and knowledgeable enough about both our funding and our existing policies that you could make informed decisions and ideas.
So, but when you say the board, you mean this whole board,
mean
not
the
just the
board.
fiscal
Not
subcommittee?
just the fiscal subcommittee,
That's what I was
but
trying
it's
to-
gonna
Oh,
be a
sorry, yes,
conversation
the Board
in
of Health, sorry.
Yeah, the whole Board of Health will set policy. I mean, a very concrete one is what you're gonna hold a public hearing on shortly, on the ordinance regarding the sanitary code. That's a policy. And yes, that is the whole Board of Health, but the fiscal subcommittee might be having a conversation about, is there a cost to that policy? How much fees do we need to generate? And get it into a deep discussion about where do you set those fees and bring that back to the whole Board of Health for a conversation on fee setting where you vote on it. Or some members of you vote on that, or if there's a greater need in the public health budget to carry out the sanitary code, maybe you need a few more FTEs, the subcommittee may come and make a recommendation. They'd coordinate with David, of course, in making a recommendation to the full Board of Health, who would make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners within the budget cycle. So contemplating the money, we see deeper conversations about the money with the fiscal subcommittee in the long run. Does that make sense?
Board Member Mejia.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Because I guess referring back to the slide, there was a slide that said, right, you wouldn't be going line item by line item, but as you're setting those those strategies, right? And you're kind of up here, I know it's line item, you're kind of going a little bit more into the weeds, but how, like, I'm just wondering how those recommendations are going to look like as they're being moved forward towards the Board of County Commissioners. Is it going to be just a recommendation on this strategy that supports these positions, but there's not gonna be really a recommendation in regards to whatever staff is recommending? So I'm just wondering where the discussion is going to take place. Maybe there is an alternative that someone thought about it in the fiscal subcommittee or the Board of Health as it comes forward. I'm just,
Right, so we're still working some of these things out, quite frankly, but and again, please chime in. But Board of County Commissioners does a deep dive on every item in the budget, and that's not going to change. So some of you are gonna get that opportunity. At the Board of Health, however, I think just what you mentioned, if the fiscal subcommittee is looking at a proposal from public health and asks questions or comes up with an alternative idea, something that leads to an alternate, then that would certainly be something that the full Board of Health would want to discuss. Here's a proposal, here's a few different ways to do it, have a discussion on the bigger level. And then, of course, 3 of you, soon 5 of you, would have that with you already as you deliberate on the health budget in the context of the county budget. It's having some of you doing both parts of the work becomes interesting exercise, if you will.
And the subcommittee has and will have access to all of our proposals. So
Right.
so even though I'm not asking them to give you line by line recommendations, they will see line by line all of our requests, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the recommendation, whatever it looks like from them, we'll continue to talk about the next couple of weeks, what that looks like. It won't be like a line item, 20-A, yes or no. That's not the thing, the conversation we've had. It's not really the role we want the subcommittee to have to fill. But I do think I want to see affirmation or confirmation of, does this, us moving this direction with these funds, does this make sense to you? Are we missing something? And then they can provide additional either ideas or we feel like you're really, this direction is too hard this way or whatever it looks like. They'll have full access to our requests versus them making recommendations on every single request. So they'll see the whole thing, but their role shouldn't be to dive in and have to make sort of funding decisions about each piece of that puzzle. Really want to leave that to the BOCC to make those kind of decisions and that kind of evaluation.
And again, this year, super short time, so we've not had an opportunity to really get in like we will next year. So,
Vice Chair Williams.
So, excuse me, I don't have a lot to add. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
But I do want to say and thank Robin and David for helping us understand a lot of the funding aspect of part of being a Board of Health members, where we allocate funds to, where it comes from, et cetera. I just want to thank them for putting in all, we haven't really dived into too much because again, we've started August, end of July with this subcommittee. So we don't have a lot of information as far as the outline of the funds. But we do have at least a very brief understanding of what it all looks like. So thank you, Robin and David.
I would like to also, many thanks to Corinne Marson, Jennifer Smith, Nicole Martinez has showed up at these early morning meetings. Rob has been participating, so the county crew has been spending wonderful mornings with committee members.
You wanted to pass to other committee members?
Yep.
I'll go. So I really, first of all, appreciate it is a steep learning curve to learn about the complexities of public health funding. I have both state government experience including budgeting and healthcare experience, specifically school health experience. And still, I understand about restricted and unrestricted funding and the dance of, meeting objectives underneath that. But still, there's a lot to learn that's really specific to public health, so I appreciate that. I appreciated hearing the department's focus on shoring up existing services before taking off in new directions. As a nurse who's worked in community health in various degrees for 30 years in this county, I've felt that erosion, is that too strong of a word, of public health services over time, and I really appreciate that approach. So specifically, family nurse partnership, nurse-family partnership, and nurses and a social work addition request to that. Leadership around environmental health. I know your administrative services just in general need to be bumped up. And then, as we've all learned the hard way, communicable disease structures. I appreciate those 4 things a lot. We have not had a lot of conversation about strategy or direction. As Robin said, it's way too early. There's too much to learn. There's too much other shoring up to do first. But I will say that conversations tend to go toward behavioral health because I think that's just top of mind for everybody in terms of issues in our community. Yeah, that's all. I appreciate you guys, and and the 7:30 coffee clutches. That's so much fun.
Well, and I also wanted to express you guys accommodating my crazy schedule and meeting that early, because that's probably the only time I can actually get there, and then I'm late every time, so I apologize. Again, I think super early, you guys were scrambling and you had a lot of other priorities, and so I would say I would love, as we get more organized and are actually working through this process, that we have like our agenda materials out like a week ahead or something, so we actually have time to think about them, to look at them, to perhaps have more time for conversation and input. And I know part of it's been tech troubles and stuff and people showing up late like me, that make it so you don't have very much time to really even give input or talk about it, or ask a lot of questions. So I think moving forward through the year, that would be super, super helpful. And then I think it would be helpful maybe to have some comparisons of staffing of like other counties that are kind of similar size. So if we say, hey, we're gonna add this role, 4 of them, do other counties have 4 of them or 5 of them or 2 of them, or, and then also the kind of help us understand, we know there's huge staffing gaps, right? So there's all these positions we're trying to even fill that aren't there. So I think it's kind of a complicated budget when you also have a bunch of open positions that aren't filled, that kind of thing would be helpful. And then, you have like nurse family partnership, it's like got a huge wait list. So like, how do you give input that like, that is a super effective, valuable program, but needs more nurses, or, and balancing that with all the other needs that you have, I think will be helpful for us to be able to give a little more. And then a lot of the new funds you're hiring for are gonna be super helpful, like the epidemiology expertise and social work expertise, things like that. And if the epi people could share also data with us, so the data can drive where the funds go, if that makes sense, that would be really helpful.
It's the performance aspect, yes.
Yeah, and thank all of you very much. It's been like for how much you were running and how much you had to balance. I appreciate that you like pulled all that together and that you even shared that much with us in that short amount of time.
Okay. Is that what we needed to cover?
Yeah, so the
Director?
expectation for October, I believe we have a meeting coming up with you as chair of the Board of Health to flesh out more of what we want to talk about in October, but you'll see a high-level overview with the main areas that David is recommending for funding and that he submitted in his budget to the Board of County Commissioners. And we'll set up the discussion around that.
Okay. Very good, thank you. So let's go to item 5A. And we have a public hearing at 5:30, so it's possible we could get this squeezed in. So what this is about is, and I'm listed as the kind of presenter, I just kind of wanted to make sure, and I'm gonna rely heavily on Director Bain and others that have been involved, and we may have questions for Jane from the prosecuting attorney's office, but there's several things going on with just in terms of the board's process and our expansion 2.0, I'll call it. And this result relates to the fact that we have 2 new county commissioners starting in January. By state law, they must be included in the Board of Health. We may talk to our legislators about changing that, but that would be a different process and take time, and it'll be something for the future. Right now, we clearly have to have all 5 members seated, and we're still subject to the requirement that there can't be more elected officials than non-elected officials. So adding the 2 commissioners, pretty straightforward, but we're gonna have to add 2 more citizen representatives, and they can come from any of the buckets, as long as we kind of space them across the 3. And so I'm not an expert in what the law requires here, so I'm just trying to be extra cautious and get out in front of this, because I wouldn't want a situation where we really hadn't taken any steps, and then the new commissioners are here, but then the Board of Health can't actually act because now we've got an imbalanced Board of Health. So we know the commissioners are coming, and there's an election in November, and they'll be sworn in December, and they'll be taking office January 1st. I would like us to roll forward a recruitment process for the new citizens. Now, corollary to that, and I'm gonna hit on 3 topics here, that's one. And there's ordinance we'll have to change. I've got a draft. It won't have to change this very much. It's really just adding the 2. So I mean, that's really simple, but there will be a legislative act to be taken by the Board of Health. We'll need to recruit. Second thing is Vice Chair Williams. I don't wanna, if you'd like to speak to this, but Vice Chair Williams has alerted the board that she is relocating. And the ordinance does require the Board of Health members to be residents of Thurston County. So my expectation is that she'll, have to resign her position, and it's good timing in a sense, because we can fold the recruitment for her replacement into the recruitment for the 2 new members, and hopefully that'll just be, all part and parcel of the same process. Does that make sense, Vice Chair Williams?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we'll talk to you about timing and of all that, but so that's pretty easy. And then a third thing I wanted to bring up, Board Member Vasquez has asked about meeting time, and since we're gonna be redoing the resolution, because she's obviously a member of the Lake City Council who is very seriously considering, I think you said 85% was your guesstimate, about moving their council meetings to Tuesdays, which would be at 6 p.m. And so we'd either have to bump it forward an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, to try to make sure she's able to get out of here and where she needs to be by 6, or potentially change the day, which is problematic. But I guess those are 3 kind of large pieces, and I didn't know if we could maybe discuss any concerns about that, any ideas, and then maybe the question of meeting time. Board Member Mejia.
Just did we get confirmation that the ordinance has to be approved by the Board of Health, or does it have to be by the Board of County Commissioners?
Jane, do you have, that was raised this morning by Commissioner Mejia, and I don't know if you've had any time to think about something like that.
Can you repeat the question again?
Question being, would the change of ordinance that's required, however simple it might be, need to be an act of this Board of Health or the Board of County Commissioners?
So the change, there's several things you mentioned, and actually I'd like to go through them, but first let me introduce myself, because I haven't met all our Board of Health members in person. So I'm Jane Futterman. I'm one of the deputy prosecuting attorneys in the prosecuting attorney's office, and I am here to advise the Board of Health I actually have been working in the background as long as this new Board of Health has been meeting, discussing matters with the county managers and Director Bain and sometimes the chair. So happy to help, and it's nice to at least see all of you in Zoom. This was sort of a last minute thing for me to attend today, and so I wasn't able to be there in person, but nice to see all of you. So first of all, let's talk about process. The establishing the members of the Board of Health, that is under the authority of the Board of County Commissioners and is put in the county code. So the amendment to the county code and county ordinance saying who will be the members of the Board of Health, that's totally under the purview of the Board of County Commissioners. So that's one thing we'll draft and take up with the Board of County Commissioners. Then under state law, both under the state statute and the Washington Administrative Code adopted by the State Board of Health. So under the state law and rules, the recruitment of new Board of Health members to fill those positions for the community members, that is done under the purview of the Board of Health. So I know that when this was done before, your staff, your department director took a significant role in doing it, but how it's done is in accordance with the state regulations, but under the direction of the Board of Health for recruiting your new members. The other thing you need to know is that there is a requirement in the state regulations that the Board of Health conduct interviews, and there's some details there that we can get into. But think about your recruitment process, and that there needs to be outreach. There's some specifics in the state regulations on how it's done. And then you, as the Board of Health, need to conduct interviews and do the selection. Once the Board of Health has selected the members to be appointed, those selections are then sent to the county commissioners to approve or deny them. And I saw a hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I don't need an answer on this now, but I am curious whether the interviews would require the presence of the full Board of Health, which would then require public notice, or if it could be a subcommittee of the Board of Health, which would also be easier to schedule and wouldn't require public notice. And then
Sure.
the recommendation to the county commissioners. Right.
And I think I can tell you what the regulation actually says. One second. It says, so the actual wording of the state regulation is all applicants for non-elected positions on the Board of Health shall be interviewed in a panel format by the local Board of Health. And then there's some details about asking a standard set of questions. It's pretty regimented. But it does say it's a panel interviewed by the Board of Health. So when this occurred to fill the current community member positions, it was done in an open meeting by the Board of Health.
I have a question to follow.
Go ahead.
Jane, as a follow-up question then, so that sounds like it's pretty tight perimeters there about what we need to do. But what about, okay, a board member resigns, and how long do we have to have a position filled? Do we have 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, at the next board meeting? If it's gonna be that prescriptive, that it's gonna be that tight to make everything work, I don't think they thought that out possibly. Anyway, but I'm just curious what that's gonna entail. Do we need to create a position, an FTE, a slot, a number, I don't know, something, and then if somebody leaves, we have that position, we just don't have it filled. And so how's that gonna work?
So I'm not sure I understand the creating the position part, but I could tell you that if you have a vacancy in the Board of Health under state law, and we put this in the county code too, because it was just taken exactly the wording from the state law. it states that vacancies on the local Board of Health shall be filled by appointment within 30 days
Oh,
and made
okay.
in the same manner as the original appointment. Now, I can tell you that that is what the law said. And in fact, that was not a change in 2021 or 2022. That provision saying when you have a vacancy, a replacement shall be appointed within 30 days has been in the law for many, many years. And that's very common in many of the state statutes for boards, both state and local boards. There's wording in the state laws saying shall be filled within 30 days. What I would say is there are many times when those deadline, it's next to impossible to meet that deadline, but I think as a matter of due diligence, the process should be, you should design a process to, try to get that position filled as close to within 30 days as you can. And of course, recruitment, whether you get individual community members stepping up and volunteering to fill that, may play a factor in how quickly you can get the position filled.
We might want to have a list, it sounds like, at some point, but okay.
Let me ask one and then I'll go back to Board Member Vasquez. So are you saying that so let's say Vice Chair Williams resigns, we have 30 days in theory to replace her, but we have to go through interviews to do that? So there's doesn't matter that it's just a vacancy.
Recruitment.
Yes, and it's not just interviews, it's a recruitment outreach process. And I know that I think the county manager was involved in this before, and there was a process. There has to be posting in public places. It talks the state regulation has some very detailed statements about including a newspaper of record, making the announcement available in various geographic locations within the county, and distributing it to community organizations, those sorts of things. So I guess we've gone through this once before under the state regulation, and so I guess I'd encourage us to look at the process followed the last time the community positions were filled, and it may be a matter of we have sort of a template for how to do that.
I mean, what I was hoping is that this meeting, we could give direction to get this process going, because in October, we're gonna be talking about the budget. We won't have a November meeting by our schedule because of the WASAC conference. In December, we're gonna potentially need to be doing interviews and seating in new members for January, but I'll start with my Board Member Vasquez.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the letter of the law and then there's the spirit of the law. And the changes that were made to the RCWs around the Board of Health membership wanted to increase representation and access. And they even changed the way that we identify the people that are gonna step onto the Board of Health to be more inclusive, right? They were supposed to be doing thorough outreach. And as someone who does recruitments for my day job, going from beginning to end of a recruitment process in 30 days and doing all of the outreach and connecting with communities is somewhat unrealistic. So I think we could all maybe read that within 30 days, we shall make an appointment, or as soon as practicable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even, I think as long as we move this forward, then we're doing what we can. Where we can't really say exactly when we're gonna hit the finish line, because we don't, like last time, we had an empty bucket, so to speak, where we had to go out and do an additional recruitment, because we didn't have any applicants that met one of the buckets. But anyway, Board Member Mejia.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess my comments is just, if the state was also following that, 30-day thread, we would have a tribal, member here in the Board of Health, but, it's been how long since the Board of Health has been here? And,
Year.
now they keep setting new rules, and our tribal partners have said that they have interest. They've sent the requests in, and then another step needs to happen now in order for us to get that member. So, they're not following the 30-day appointment rule. But my question is in regards to, in order for that recruitment to fill that vacancy, right? Is it going to have to be specifically for that bucket that that board member filled, or is it just, can it just be an open recruitment and, you know, kind of, then that discussion is going to happen with the recruitment committee, or does it have to be promoted specifically for that bucket? I guess bucket is what.
Well, that's an interesting question, given that we've got the two other new slots, I think we can just recruit for all buckets. Because I think we could use anyone from any bucket, because the two new ones can be placed, you know, how we want them. And then, of course, Vice Chair Williams, I can't remember exactly which one was which, but with three at issue that have to go across the three buckets, we can just recruit, I think, broadly.
So, okay, so then your recommendation is to move ahead with the three seats, and start the recruitment process now. What other recommendation or what action is it that you're also recommending, Chair, at this time? Do you want us to talk about forming a subcommittee or process? What is?
Well, if that's, so I heard Jane say that the that the interviews need to be conducted in a panel format by the local Board of Health. Does that mean all of us, right?
Or quorum.
It could be delegated.
Can it?
Yeah, I believe so, that that is the way that the regulations read. They provide to have the whole Board of Health conducting the interview.
Assistant County Manager Gilder, different point of view. I heard you say that you thought they could be delegated.
I'm aware of a jurisdiction that has delegated the interview process to a subcommittee in the past but that was by action of the board that basically delegated that authority to that subcommittee.
I mean, personally, I'd love it if we could all interview them, but the timing and getting everybody, you know, being limited to our monthly meetings or having to call a special meeting and stuff. I mean, the subcommittee could be very useful, I think, to have that.
So I think we should move ahead with announcing it, the announcement, the release, and then if there are members interested in participating in that subcommittee, we can have that while Jane can really see if that's something that we can delegate, but maybe making a motion that if we can delegate, you know, we have interested parties that David can reach out to and say, okay, it's a go, or actually, no, we're gonna need the full Board of Health, but that way at least there's an action to move
We're
forward.
not waiting.
Yeah.
Right. And if we need to call a special meeting of the board, I think we should be willing to do that.
2 questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying some of the tribal questions. I'm curious who appoints the tribal member? Like, where does that
American
responsibility?
Indian Health Commission,
Okay.
AIHC.
And they've had candidates come forward and haven't
We
acted?
know that at least Squaxin Island and Chehalis, we know those two have kind of raised their hand. But then I was told that then the AIHC was believing there needed to be a legislative action of the councils of those tribes to create so there was another step that hadn't been done, or, you know, so we're not really sure beyond knowing that there's been.
Have other counties been successful?
Some have. It's been a mixed bag with the commission across the state, to be blunt.
There should be a template for how to get somebody approved by the IH, if they're approving others.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Okay. Thank you. My other question is actually more for us, I think, and that is, I know there are, you call them buckets, prescribed in the law about what categories people need to be in, but can we put other criteria in there if we wanted to? Could we, for example, say we need somebody with behavioral health expertise or with environmental health expertise and put that criteria on in addition to what's prescribed in the law, or is that a bridge too far?
I mean, that's in, one of the buckets has that, so we could just say that's what, I think.
Right.
If you want to institutionalize it, that's a different question. If you want to say for this recruitment, we would like to.
This recruitment, that's what I want to say.
think we would have that latitude.
So I think that, and I'm looking to Jane to confirm, but I believe that part of what's in the code is if you have more than one in a particular bucket, that they cannot have the same type of background. So let's say you have a health professional, they can't both be psychiatrists, if you will. One could be with a mental health expertise and the other perhaps geriatrics or
Okay.
whatever. They just can't have the same background, but I think you can, I mean, again, I'm looking at Jane, I think you can we'd love to find someone with this type of expertise.
I've got the
Yeah.
code in front of me, not sure.
Yeah, you'll have discretion when you're doing the recruiting in terms of, like, for example, interviews. If you want to stress certain kinds of backgrounds to round out the breadth of the Board of Health and the breadth of knowledge of the Board of Health, you could certainly ask questions to stress certain things. The code and the state law is prescriptive in having right now, as we have the 3 community members, have one from each of the 3 categories, but each category is very broad. So what I was going to add was, when Vice Chair Williams submits resignation, the recruitment for that position needs to be to fill that category of community member, but it's a pretty broad category. Then one of the things that needs to happen is the Board of County Commissioners needs to decide what the new ordinance will look like for the remaining 2 members, assuming that those other 2 members will be distributed among the same categories. Then certainly you can open recruitment for all the categories, but if there's an initial effort to fill Vice Chair Williams' spot, that would be for the specific of the 3 categories that position is filling. And I'd like to add on a sort of somewhat different topic, but that was mentioned. I just want to add one more thing. There was a comment, Chair Menzer commented on potential for needing to change the meeting time. The meeting time is set by resolution of the Board of Health. And so that I had drafted that resolution for you. I think the first or second meeting you met, but I'm happy to revise that. And it's a matter of making a determination among the Board of Health when and if you'd like to have revisions to that ordinance or to the resolution as to when you want to meet.
Not 7 a.m., please.
I was just gonna say, we can use any additional criteria for Board of Health members as preferred qualifications when doing the recruitment rather than required. So if we have a lot of candidates, which would be great, we can use it as a way of identifying our top candidates.
And on meeting time, when will your council be deciding for sure?
I will find out though, and I will give you that information.
Okay, I'm gonna recess this discussion because we have a public hearing and we're gonna pick it back up. We're not quite done, but we're gonna get our public hearing out of the way because it's 5:35.